What is it that makes the David Horowitz Freedom Center different, apart from our name? And the fact that we're doing this event in Vegas, we flew on September 11th at a time when there were people telling me, I'm just superstitious. I don't want to fly on September 11th. And we did it right after probably the most high-profile assassination of a political conservative in America, because we're not afraid. And we get that power, that superpower from David Horowitz. David was never afraid. What is it that makes the David Horowitz Freedom Center different? Again, we go right back to David, because David called things exactly as they are. And like him, we know what the left is, and we are willing to say it. We know what Islam is, and as we've heard on this panel, we are willing to say it. The left is a terrorist movement. The murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk is not an aberration. It's not something different. It's part of what the left has been doing for centuries. It is what is going to continue doing until we actually go ahead and put a stop to it. Now, if David were alive today, and I very much wish that he were alive, that he would be the CEO and that he would be with us. If David were alive today after Charlie Kirk's assassination, he would be outraged. He would be angry. He would not be shocked, though. And that's the reality. When you actually understand what the left is, you are not shocked by leftist violence. You are not shocked by leftist depravity. You are not shocked by leftist evil because you know what the left is. And not only do we know what the left is, we are going to go out and say it, and we are going to keep on saying it. And David knew that very well because David was actually the canary in the coal mine. David was going to campuses to fight the original version of BLM when he was campaigning against race reparations. He was going to college campuses after 9/11 to speak out about the jihad. He was doing it. He faced harassment. He faced threats. But the worst thing of it all was the complicity of university administrations, of university officials in that situation. Because we would actually end up having to pay huge amounts of money for security. And that was effectively a barrier. It was a way of saying that conservative speakers cannot come to campus. Now, there was something that was very revealing that happened the day before Charlie Kirk's assassination. And FIRE, you released a survey of about 58,000 college students. And the survey was remarkable because the survey showed that 1 out of 3 college students are okay with using violence to silence speakers on campus that they oppose. 1 in 3. Even if you just take that as revealing of the students who answered the survey, we are still looking at over 20,000 students who are willing to go ahead and say, we are okay with using violence to silence campus speakers. And by the way, don't think that the other 2/3 were innocent, that they're angels, that they believe in free speech. No. 71% of college students, 71% support blocking support shouting down speakers that they oppose. This is something that happened to David Horowitz repeatedly. It's a rite of passage for conservative speakers on campuses. About 51% or so support blocking students from going to hear speakers that they oppose. So the majority of college students on campuses oppose free speech. Over half of those 58,000 or so are willing to go ahead and say that openly. And if we generalize it to the 18 million college students that actually exist today, we are talking about millions and millions of people. Millions and millions of people who support violence. And of those, just like in Islam, there's a percentage that are actually willing to act on it. That is what we saw with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There's a small percentage that are willing to do it, and a much, much larger percentage that support it. And that is the real problem there. Only so many people are actually going to be willing to take action. But a significant percentage, we are now looking at potentially a majority on Ivy League college campuses, support violence. And we have to understand what that means. The process that began really with David, and David was really the first to really show this, was the creation of campuses as no-go zones for conservatives. Initially, it began with conservative speakers, supposedly some that were controversial. People said, David is a provocateur. He's very controversial. Well, eventually it spread to these so-called non-controversial conservative speakers. They themselves, people who were very mild, very moderate, people who spoke very politely and were not confrontational, were physically assaulted on college campuses. People like Charles Murray, for example, were physically assaulted on college campuses. And then it spread not just to the conservatives, because initially it's just the conservatives that this is happening to. They're all bigots anyway. It began happening to liberals who in some way dissented from some agenda item that the left wanted. Because they were creating not just a political monoculture. The first step after purging the right is you start purging the people who aren't sufficiently on the left. And that began happening. And you had liberal faculty that were being forced out and found themselves having to resign because they disagreed with some point of dogma, whether it was, the idea that women are an imaginary species or that Israel needs to be destroyed. And then, of course, they went after college students. College students who were all conservative could be reported, denounced on the most slight trivial offenses. At one point, a college campus went ahead and declared an emergency because an anonymous student, very revealing way, an anonymous student had to post the copy of the Bill of Rights, specifically the First Amendment, and that was considered triggering and hate speech. And of course, it went on from there. We laughed at some of the stuff. A lot of people laugh at some of the stuff. It's just so ridiculous. Then, of course, they kept on escalating because the next step was to build actual terrorists on campus and college campuses and start blocking large numbers of college students from even being able to go to campus. And they did this, as we saw, and they did this with the support of university officials, with the support of university security. I was at UCLA and just watched so-called campus security go ahead and actually help enforce these measures. And when actual, Jewish students, Jewish community members were tear gassed, they would pretend not to see anything. And you actually had LAPD people on the scene, and they would go, "Well, go file a police report. Go to the precinct and file a police report," instead of arresting the person who did it. So there was complicity from the top down. At the UCLA campus, when you actually had a pro-Hamas encampment set up and it was finally broken up, the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors, which controls Los Angeles County, went ahead and almost unanimously, all party line vote by the Democrats, voted to provide legal defense, taxpayer-funded legal defense for the Hamas supporters. So don't get the idea that this is just a campus issue. This was coming from the very top down by Democrats. Now campuses have successfully been turned into a no-go zone. Now we have the next step, which is actually a campus assassination. Because once you've actually turned campuses into terrorist camps, well, you can go ahead now and start killing people. Is it going to get worse? Well, people who know the counterculture and remember the 60s and the 70s know that it is going to get worse. They've actually achieved their goal of turning campuses into no-go zones. And the next step is to actually fully radicalize them and begin an actual war. Now, what does Charlie's death really mean? What it really means is that the cause that he gave his life to, the idea that you can go on campuses and debate, it's not actually a viable strategy anymore. Because you can go on campuses, you can debate, and if you actually win the debate, they will kill you. It's not enough just to go on campuses and debate, something that David began doing long ago. It's not enough just to say that we are going to go on campus and try to, even if they actually let us in. I was with Michael Finch when we were going to go over to UCLA and hear Robert Spencer speak. And then it turned out that they were not going to let Robert Spencer speak. So even assuming that they will let you speak, assuming you can get past the bomb threat and the death threat, and then the actual assassin's bullets, well, you can try to debate on those terms. Those are not terms that we can debate on. So we have to deal with the reality of what the college campus is, not what we want it to be, not what we imagine it to be. Not to think of it as just a forum where we can win a debate. We should treat college campuses the way we treated the segregated South during the Civil Rights Movement. We should treat it the way we treated Nazi Germany after the defeat. We need a denazification for college campuses. Some people have said, oh, President Trump is doing to UCLA, to Columbia, it's too much. He's demanding millions of dollars. I would say it's not nearly enough. Back in the day, in the 1950s, we had about 2.5 million college students. In the 1970s, we had about 8 million college students. Today, we have 18 million college students. We expect pretty much everybody now to go on campus, and this was Bill Clinton's solution to everything, Obama's solution to everything. You're going to lose your job as a coal miner, you're going to lose your job to AI now. Well, it's okay, you're going to go to college, you're going to get a college degree, and that is going to solve everything. Has America become a better place now that we have 18 million college students? Was it better in the 1970s when we had 8 million college students instead of 2.5 million in the 50s? Were the 50s or the 70s a better time? What do you think? 50s, 70s, which one do you pick? 50s, thank you. Sending everybody to college has not made America better. John earlier was talking about all the people who were making all these ugly comments about Charlie's death. I can pretty much guarantee you that a whole lot of these people, the vast majority of them, pretty much all of them are graduates of college. And that their college degrees are absolutely useless. Very few of these people have a college degree in anything worthwhile. They have Joe Biden college degrees. They have degrees that are there for the sake of having a role in some sort of woke enterprise. And the fundamental thing that we need to do is to actually start rethinking college itself. We need to start rethinking the value of college, a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is being subsidized by American taxpayers. We need to rethink the idea that college makes you a better person and that we are better off as a country if we have more college graduates. We're absolutely not. Are colleges preparing us for the future? They're preparing our students for the future. They're preparing them for massive amounts of student loan debt and degrees in absolutely nothing worthwhile. We're still getting our tech talent from India and China. Even the students that are in American schools that are getting their STEM degrees are coming from China and India. What does that really say? College has absolutely failed. The entire higher education system has absolutely failed. It's failed at its purpose, at its stated purpose, which is to give us a well-educated and trained task force. It has succeeded at its actual intended purpose of creating a massive nationwide terrorist movement. The murder of Charlie Kirk ought to be yet another wake-up call in that regard if we needed any more wake-up calls. What we need to do is not to simply reform higher education. David was fighting for that. And if politicians had listened to him, if colleges had listened to him, including some of the same deans and professors who rejected him at the time and then themselves were forced out, if they'd listened to him at the time, then we could have reformed college maybe. At the moment, we cannot reform college. What we need to do is to drastically shrink higher education. And there are ways that we can actually do that. We do not actually need to have Ivy League institutions be the center around which our lives revolve. We need to actually deal with the reality of what college campuses are, and we need to do that because just as we deal with the reality of what the left is. And this is something that the David Horowitz Freedom Center has always been dedicated. We are not going to end our campus efforts. We are engaging in important reporting on college campuses. There are people with us who are actually continuing to speak on college campuses. We are not giving up the fight on college campuses, but we need to be clear about what the modern college campus is, and we need to actually be ready to start treating it like terrorist training camps before we actually have to start droning Harvard and the rest of the Ivy League.